Then I will call to order regular council meeting number 1533 for March 2nd. And in honor of the Liwa Tool, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwa Nation. This meeting of council is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the PHO orders respecting physical distancing requirements. Council members will be involved in and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Council members attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting, so this can be recorded in the minutes. For clarity, if a council member does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video feed for an extended period of time, and it is unclear to staff whether they are present in the meeting, the council member will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the council member to reappear. Members of the public who wish to ask questions during open question period at the end of the meeting will be able to do so, and I will provide instructions at the time. With that, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve.
Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting number 1532 from February 16th. Moved by Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the previous council meeting? Seeing none, rise with report from in camera. Have to give me a moment. So we have a couple of rise with reports. So at the in-camera meeting held earlier today, council determined to rise with a report on the following resolutions. Naming of the recreation site and unnamed road off of Pemberton Farm Road. So in-camera meeting 1530 held January 12th, council resolved that the recreation site be named Dendoff Park in recognition of the Dendoff family gift to the village, and further resolved that the unnamed road that accesses the recreation site north of the site located 7362 Pemberton Farm Road East be named Sabre Way. At in-camera meeting 1531 on February 2nd, council received correspondence from UBCM advising that the village has been approved for grant funding in the amount of $613,847 for the North Arm outlet replacement, Riverlands culvert gate replacement, Green River Miller hydrometric gauge install projects under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund 2020 Structural Mitigation Funding Stream. And the last one is, I think the last one, yeah. At the in-camera meeting 1532 on February 16th, council received correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Affairs advising that the Village of Pemberton has been approved for grant funding in the amount of $974,000 for the Pemberton Area Mountain Bike or Mountain Skills Park through the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. Awesome news. So happy to be able to rise with report with that. And then we go to rise with report from Committee of the Whole. Give me a sec. So the recommendation from Committee of the Whole meeting 212 held earlier today. And this is around the annual business license fees for cannabis retail stores and cannabis production facilities. Pardon me. And that is to recommend to council that staff be directed to undertake an amendment process to the Village of Pemberton Business License Bylaw number 855 that will include the following changes. 1, to reduce the business license fees for cannabis retail stores and cannabis production facilities to 50% of their current rate in 2022. Number 2, to further reduce these fees to match our standard business license fees in 2023. Number 3, to add an application fee of $1,000 to business license applications for cannabis production facilities. And number 4, to increase the application fee for business license applications for cannabis retail stores from $1,000 to $1,000 plus advertising costs for the notification as required by Village of Pemberton recreational cannabis retail policy and by Section 94 of the Community Charter. Okay.
Mayor Richmond,
Yes.
we need that resolution to be moved and seconded and carried.
Can I get a motion to that effect? Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Craddock. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Committee minutes. We don't have any. Delegations, none. We are off to number 9 and the office of the CAO. We will wait for Ms. Hutchinson to join us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here tonight.
Thank you for joining us. We are about to, well, we'll turn it over to you to talk about this funding application.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to seek support for a funding application to the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative for surface upgrades to the Pemberton Community Barn. So just for a bit of background, the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative is a federal fund supporting small-scale infrastructure projects that create and adapt public spaces and programming and services for public spaces to respond to ongoing needs arising from COVID-19. The Pemberton Community Barn surface upgrade project would provide much needed upgrade to the Pemberton Community Barn floor with the installation of new concrete surface and also create a public recreation space with the installation of a portable ice rink for free public use. So just to give you some background around the reasoning, the surface of the community barn has been a long-term goal. As part of the original Pemberton Community Barn project, the barn floor was prepped for surfacing for when funding became available. Staff have also received a lot of feedback from members of the public and from the Pemberton Farmers Market that surfacing the barn would be hugely beneficial. I know that area can get pretty windy and lift the gravel, which can be quite unpleasant. Staff have opted to pursue concrete for this project as it was identified as the preferred surface during the downtown enhancement project. Also from a public works perspective, a concrete surface would be a lot easier to keep clean and tidy. And lastly, the project would provide safe recreation opportunities for the community that also meet current public health guidelines, which is also in line with the objectives of the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. So in terms of costings, the Class D cost estimate totals $329,000. If the application were successful, $250,000 would be covered by the grant funding. Staff would recommend that Council allocate an amount of up to $80,000 from the village's COVID-19 Safe Restart Fund to cover the remainder. So the recommendation, staff recommend that the Village of Pemberton apply to the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative for grant funding for up to an amount of $250,000 for a portable ice rink and surface upgrade to the Pemberton Community Barn. Further to this, the resolution, like this above resolution is required for the purpose of the grant application. However, Council may also wish to consider confirming their support for the allocation of $80,000 from the COVID-19 Safe Restart Fund through a second resolution. And I have some wording for that. Staff recommend that Council support the allocation of an amount of up to $80,000 from the village's COVID-19 Safe Restart Fund to cover the remainder should the grant application be successful. So that's it. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hutchinson. Questions, thoughts? Mr. Craddock and then Councillor Zahn.
Well, thank you very much for the report, Ms. Hutchinson. It's well done. Just wanted to verify with you the portable ice skating rink. Is that, what are we talking about there? Is that going to be installed with the concrete flooring or how is that going to be done?
So it's a portable rink that can be put up in the winter time and then packed down, you know, in the summertime so that the whole barn floor could be used for other purposes. So it would be, yeah, just a temporary kind of structure during the winter time. And the quotes that we've received include, things like refrigeration and the whole cost of the custom made structure. So, yeah.
So it would be, if I might follow up, it's going to be the boards that go around the rink to contain the water, and it's going to be refrigerated through the concrete?
Not through the concrete, but I just saw that CAO Gilmore had her hand up there, so I might defer to her for some more information.
Yes, just a little bit of further information. So it would be the concrete surface, and then there's a liner and the refrigeration, then a liner, and then the boards, and we would flood the liner. And so this would actually be multi-purpose. Because we could, if we decided that it would be nice to have some type of event, maybe not having it in the barn, we could use it at other locations as well. The other thing is, once we complete the construction of the amenity building out at the soccer field, we will have an additional portable trailer, or I guess CCAM, that we would be able to store this in. So we wouldn't need to acquire any additional storage facilities. And that would be located at the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you. And just one last follow-up. To what temperature would this be still usable on an outdoor basis?
It's highly, so it comes with 2 chillers for an arena or a rink of this size. And it only is activated once it gets cold. Now, that is a very good question. I don't have the details on me right now, but it can be used when it's in the positive, obviously, in a plus type temperature. And the reason we're suggesting the barn as well is, as we all know, we go to use any type of rink, and when it's perfect conditions, and then it rains and it warms up and then it freezes and it starts making the surface not very pleasant or actually skatable anymore. But let me, I will find that information out for you, and I can get right back to you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that's sounds like a really exciting project for the community. I hope we get the funding. It'd be fun to see everybody downtown enjoying it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
May I add one more comment about funding?
Yeah.
So right now we do have a nice contingency and some additional engineering costs included in the grant proposal that we may not use. So we may not be using as many or any of all of the COVID restart funds, but I think we need something to backstop us in the event that something goes awry. But at this time, we do have some healthy contingencies factored into the cost estimate that we're supplying for the grant application.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Zant?
Actually, a lot of my questions were based around the same questions that Councillor Craddock brought up. But aside from that, my comments would be, I really hope we get this grant. I think it'd be huge for our community. And an ice rink has been, I know an ice rink has been on the list for a long time. And I think using it under the barn is a great use of that space. And like I said, I really hope we get this grant. I think it'd be fantastic. So thank you to staff for the report, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. The portable rink is a bit of a new concept, so I guess that came from some of the recreation planning and consultation we did a couple of years ago. And then my other comment is I'm glad we're going with the stamped or colored concrete rather than the asphalt. I think that's really great, and I think it could have some really a great aesthetic that matches the beauty of the barn. So I'm really happy with that, and I hope we do something really creative there.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else, or would somebody like to make the motion?
I'd like to make the motion.
Councillor Noble. So we'll make we were gonna break that into 2 then, 1 to apply for the grant and then 1 to backstop with the COVID restart. So the first one is to support the grant application for the project, moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And now a motion to backstop with any remaining funds up to $80,000 with COVID restart funds. Moved by Councillor Noble,
motion.
seconded by Councillor Craddock. Discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Hutchinson. I've got all my fingers crossed. That would be so awesome. It would be win, 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 summer and winter, all the way through. It would be amazing. So thank you.
Very much.
I'll grease up my goalie pads.
So, okay. Passes. So next up, we're going to wait for Ms. Tays to join us. Yeah, how wonderful would that be? What a great use of the barn in the winter and the summer.
I really hope really hope we get that. I think that'd be amazing. And it's not even just, ice skating, hockey, curling. I mean, there's so many different avenues to go down with that. I think it'd be fantastic.
Okay, Ms. Tays, thank you for joining us. We are moving on to the UBCM evacuation route planning funding stream application. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. So the purpose of this report is to seek council support to revise the resolution that was submitted with the village's application to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund evacuation route planning funding stream. At the regular council meeting held on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, council supported an application to UBCM's evacuation route planning funding stream to conduct a consultant-led evacuation exercise in the Pemberton Valley and the Squamish floodplain affected areas in partnership with the SLRD and the District of Squamish. In consultation with UBCM's program officer, it was requested that all partnering jurisdictions submit one regional application for the project, and therefore at the regular council meeting held on Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, staff brought forward a request to council to rescind the resolution passed at the regular council meeting held on Tuesday, November 3rd, and at that meeting, a resolution was passed that reflected support for a joint application. Following submission of the application, and as the SLRD has been designated as the project lead, UBCM has now requested that the resolution indicate support for the proposed project and a willingness to allow the SLRD to receive funds and provide overall grant management. So the first recommendation is that the resolution passed at the regular meeting held on Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, that council supports a joint application with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District and the District of Squamish to UBCM's evacuation route planning funding stream for a $60,000 consultant-led evacuation exercise in the Pemberton Valley and Squamish floodplain affected areas be rescinded. And the second recommendation is that council supports a joint application with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District and the District of Squamish to UBCM's evacuation route planning funding stream and approves the appointment of the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District as the primary partner to apply for, receive, and manage funding for this grant on behalf of all three partners.
Great, thank you, Ms. Tays. Any questions? Okay, I will look for first a motion to rescind the original resolution as laid out by Ms. Tays, moved by Councillor Zant, seconded by Councillor Noble. Discussion. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And then the second recommendation to support the joint application as laid out in your agenda, moved by Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Tays. Have a great night. Okay, we're going on to corporate and legislative services.
Before we go on there, I didn't see a spot for verbal update. I just had a quick verbal update. I wanted to talk about, if that's all right.
All right, then.
I just wanted to let council know that this is regarding some additional funding applications that we put in. And just to let council know, we were not successful in receiving the SAREP grant funding for the Pemberton Farm Road East Friendship Trail. However, we are going to be taking that away and continuing to look for other sources of funding or looking at some type of a scaled back approach to constructing the trail. So you will be seeing something coming forward in the near future so that we can try to get that project done as soon as we can.
Thank you. Any questions? We have a motion to receive
to
the
receive.
verbal report. Councilor Zan, seconded by Councilor Noble. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Okay, corporate and legislative services. We are talking about the Lower Mainland Local Government Association resolutions for consideration. Ms. Fraser.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you'll recall, the last meeting, we received correspondence from the Lower Mainland Local Government Association respecting resolutions, the submissions for resolutions at their annual AGM. And at the Committee of the Whole meeting held on, at the regular meeting on February 16th, a discussion took place around the resolutions and the potential ideas for resolutions to be submitted. And at that time, staff were asked to prepare a draft resolution regarding consideration of a change to the name of the province, the coat of arms, and the flag, representative of the multicultural nature of our population and inclusive of Indigenous history. And then a second resolution was requested for staff to prepare, requesting funding to ensure management and protection of parks, crown lands not managed for tourism, and natural resources in manner respectful of Aboriginal, traditional, and contemporary land use as increased tourism impacts to the natural environment. So just one point to remember, or to remind council that we are not in a position to be able to submit a resolution that has already been considered, or on an item that is, or a topic that's already been considered and moved through the process in the past. So staff has pulled together a draft resolution for council's consideration, and we might want to just break these up into two and have discussions. I defer to the mayor as to how he'd like to do this. Staff prepared a resolution with respect to the consideration of the change of name, coat of arms, and flag of British Columbia. And I believe that Councillor Noble has provided an update to that. So perhaps I would look to council to follow up on that discussion, or how would you like me to proceed?
Yeah,
Mayor?
let's break it into two. So let's have a conversation about the first resolution around change of name, coat of arms, and flag. Councillor Noble, did you want to add anything in there, or speak to it before I open it up to the rest of council?
Everybody received and was able to open the edit that I sent around?
Yes.
Okay. Did anybody have any issues or changes that they wanted to make?
Nope. Any thoughts on the resolution as presented? Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
I don't have Councillor Noble's resolution in front of me. I just have the one from our council agenda. And the only comment I would make was that paragraph 4 includes the little multicultural clause at the end. And I think paragraph 3 would also benefit from that. But other than that, I support it.
That's one of the edits I did make.
Okay.
Do we want to put this up on the screen?
I can share the, just stand by for a minute. Oh, sorry, just working under pressure here.
It's all good. I could always read it out too if it's easier.
Yeah, I can just share my screen now that I've got it. Can everybody see it? Is it big enough?
Yep.
No.
No.
Okay, I'm working in Publisher, which is not something I'm familiar with. So there we go.
Yeah,
Is
no.
that viewable now?
It is. Thank you. Take a quick minute and give it a read just to be sure. And has anybody got any thoughts or questions or comments on this? If not, I'll look for a motion that this resolution be presented to LMLGA. Moved by Councillor Noble,
So,
seconded by Councillor Zant. Any further discussion? You could take it down now, Ms. Fraser, so I could see everyone. Thank you. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Noble, often or more often than not, the way it works with these resolutions and for the convention is that doesn't have to be, but usually there's a sponsor to the resolution. In other words, the municipality that puts forward the resolution will speak to the resolution, and then a debate on the floor will ensue unless it's quick and everybody votes. But I don't know how it works if you're not registered for the convention. I don't know if we would be invited to sponsor the resolution, but if we are, my question to you is, would you be prepared to speak to the resolution at the convention?
Yes, when is this?
The annual general meeting for the Lower Mainland Local Government Association is going to be held virtually, and it's May 12th to 14th. And that is actually something we need to know from councils who would like to attend. That was going to be my last little bit, but
We'll talk about the resolution soon.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll make a point to be available.
Okay. Did I call the question?
Pardon?
Did I call the
Yes.
question?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
And then the second resolution is around funding around parks and backcountry, and hearing and thinking about Ms. Fraser's concerns around, or not concerns, but that we cannot submit a resolution that's been submitted before or in the same nature. I'm wondering, I mean, this is something that we've been strong on in Pemberton and council for a while, is properly funding our natural assets and our parks so that they're looked after, and for all the obvious reasons without going into it. I'm wondering if we frame it a little bit more around a COVID lens, if that would make it a more of a presentable resolution at LMLGA. So in other words, in light of the fact that we know that there is going to be a heavy amount of traffic and visitation to our parks and our backcountries and our crown lands due to the encouragement of the provincial government for residents to get out and recreate in the great outdoors during the pandemic, and the importance of that, we would ask that there's an appropriate, and I wouldn't use the word appropriate, but there would be an appropriate amount of funding around managing these assets, staffing them, and protecting them. So I'm wondering if we framed it around COVID in that way, if we could not get around, but maybe more specific with our resolution. So thoughts from council on that one? Anyone? Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
So, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. If we could frame around COVID, I think that'd be great. But other thing, after I'm reading through this resolution that we've submitted in the past, we've talked about trying to get the province to pick up some more of the funding as opposed to municipalities for our tourism groups. But to be specific, can we ask for funding for just certain things like just boots on the ground? Have we done anything like, I'm being very specific, and I don't know if the province would like that or not, but if we try to aim it at specific issues we're having, whether it's, garbage cleanup, where it's park rangers or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't think boots on the ground is too specific. It is definitely something we've asked for. The way we framed it in the past has been, the province has spent X dollars on marketing. We would like to see them spend a similar budget, if not more, on management, including boots on the ground. We make the case for, having recreation site, people would be able to go there and check for campfires, all that sort of thing, protect us from forest fires, more toilet, porta potties, more education. So I don't think you're being too specific, and I think that is sort of what we're asking for in this resolution, is more boots on the ground, as well as, again, more education and maybe some other assets like porta potties and otherwise.
I think it's very clear that you're right. The province has marketed BC quite well, and people are coming. We need the help to
And again, we've made that.
Protect the environment that we enjoy as well as you.
That's it. Let's protect our riches. So yeah, we've made that plea before through resolutions and otherwise, but I think if we frame it around COVID, we could maybe get it on the floor.
And I agree with, like you said, with COVID, where there is more people needed to handle those regulations. So.
Any other thoughts from council? Go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
As I understand it, the executive at the LMLGA will review they do review all of the resolutions, and if they determine that it's already been something that they feel has been considered, then they'll send it back to us and let us know that. But it's definitely worth it to take the COVID approach for sure. So.
Okay, so the way I sort of laid that out, does that give you the framework?
Yes, I think what we'll need to do is go back and put some thought to it and bring it back for March 16th. The submissions have to be made by March 26th, I believe. So if council is willing to provide staff direction to facilitate a resolution through a COVID lens, we can put some wording together and bring it back for you to consider on March 16th.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Second, Councilor Noble. Further discussion? I would just say include in that wording, Ms. Fraser, that we saw the increased traffic last year, the increased pressures as a result. There's tons of data to back it up, and we anticipate that it's going to be that much, not worse, that much more this year. So I would like to see that word.
Mayor Richmond?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councilor Zant.
I was just going to ask, in that regards to what you just said about the increased traffic, does the province ever or LRG ever come back and ask for statistics in regards to that specifically per municipality?
I don't think through this process here, but there's the Destination BC survey that we'll talk about a little bit later, and there's other ways we could present that, but it wouldn't be in the framework of this resolution.
I was just thinking, my thought was that how we used our volunteer fire department to guide people in the new, when we had the new COVID regulations that came out, saying, well, in our specific scenario, we had to use our volunteer fire department. Might be a good statistic to use, but we'll leave that up to staff.
Just one thing council may want to consider is that this resolution won't be going forward to the to UBCM until September.
Yeah, I recognize that, and
so it may be 2021 and beyond.
Framing is maybe a little more around, or the wording is a little more around. By the time it goes to UBCM, we will be and will have experienced it throughout the summer, and anticipate this will only continue as the pandemic has highlighted the importance and the desire for our recreational assets. Call the question. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Fraser.
Thank you.
Okay, on to development services. We'll wait for Ms. Pedrini to join us. Good evening, Ms. Pedrini. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. We're moving on to the zoning amendment regarding retaining wall regulations, and I'll turn it over to you for your report.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just catching up here with the agenda. All right, so the purpose of my report tonight is to seek some direction from council on options and specifically the extent and cost of analysis that could be needed to introduce a suitable or justifiable maximum retaining wall height for hillside development. So this is basically considered a simple work plan, well, unbudgeted work plan report, because we have had a chance, staff has had a chance to do some preliminary investigative work to look at what might be needed in order to justify a maximum retaining wall height. And obviously, we don't want to choose an arbitrary number. We want to use data and have taken the time to do some analysis in order to come up with a number that's relevant and suitable. So the background on this is goes back to December 2020, when the Committee of the Whole received a report on hillside developments, and specifically some of the challenges that are presently being encountered with our current bylaw restriction with a maximum height of 1.2 meters. At that time, the Committee of the Whole recommended that staff be directed to undertake a review and amendment process to the Village of Pemberton zoning bylaw to address retaining wall height provisions. Staff came back, hoping to expedite some in-progress applications. We came back in January and we recommended that the maximum height of 1.2 meters be removed from our zoning bylaw, and that we would require engineering analysis and review for any wall over 1.2 meters. So this approach would have been similar to what we had in our previous zoning bylaw, whereby retaining walls greater than 2.4 meters in height triggered engineering, but that we had not stated a clear maximum. So at that meeting, council asked staff to go back and look into other options for creating a maximum retaining wall height restriction, and to bring those discussions back to a future Committee of the Whole meeting. I realize tonight's not a Committee of the Whole meeting, but this isn't actually a report whereby we're displaying all of the results of our analysis and asking you to choose and discuss the information that we have to present to you. Basically, this is a kind of a step in before that, where we need some direction, because we have created a scope of work that would help us establish an appropriate maximum height. And so we wanted to present basically the scope of work that we feel would be necessary, and get council's go ahead in order to undertake the work, and also to find the budget to pay for the work. So our base work program is estimated to take, we're hoping it wouldn't, but we wanted to be realistic given the amount of work we have on in our long range planning, in our work plan right now, as well as a lot of current applications that we're processing. So we're looking at it taking about 6 months to do the research and analysis to be able to bring forward a number that we could defend. So, and also we've outlined that we could do some enhancements to that base work plan. We could look at doing some consultation with the public and stakeholders, which would actually increase the time, as well as we could get some design assistance, and that would be getting some additional design resources that would enhance our ability to more accurately understand the impacts of the grades variation on building form and the retention needs of the properties in question. So based on that work plan and those proposed enhancements, we have a proposed budget that could be anywhere from about, let me see here, what was it? About $11,000 to $1,200, $400. And I've already touched on the timing. So we definitely would want to take about 10 weeks to do the analysis, and then we would go through the bylaw amendment process, which is typically 2 months. So one thing I wanted to mention is that we could do all of this analysis, and we could come back once we really analyze the grades and find out that the average retention needed in some of our hillside neighborhoods is about 4 meters or 5 meters. And knowing that that might not be maybe necessarily what council wants to hear or that's palpable to the community, and may not protect neighborhood character or meet the intent of the hillside design guidelines. I also wanted to just put forward for discussion purposes some other options that council might consider at this point. And so they're outlined here in the report. I don't have any preference for any of these options. Like I said, I'm just really trying to put forward lots of options for your discussion purposes. One being that we could, excuse me, revert the provisions for retaining walls back to what we had in bylaw 466 from 2001, where we would require a registered professional to oversee the development of any retaining wall greater than 2.4 meters. And at the same time, we could put that as the maximum for retaining walls. We could also revisit the recommended approach that was presented in January 2021, whereby the maximum height would be removed, but that we would have the requirement for engineering analysis and the provision of vegetative screening for any retaining wall over 1.2 meters in height. And because maintaining the status quo is always a feasible option at times, I also just wanted to present that as another option that council might want to retain the current approach on maximum height, but maybe focus more on education and awareness of the village's preference for guidelines that meet our hillside development design guidelines. So those are some of the options presented to you tonight. If you agree with the work plan, and then you can give us direction and staff will go away. And I guess we would look to council to find out how we would cover the costs of it, but staff could go away and start that work. And if you don't, I don't feel that the extent of that work or the cost of that work is what you want to see happen, then maybe we can think about some other options, or we can come back with a fuller review of, that sort of elaborates on some of these options that I've mentioned tonight. And I just wanted to correct myself. The work plan was the ranged in cost from $7,000 to around $1,200, or sorry, $12,000. So I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Pedrini, for the report and for bringing that range of options forward for discussion. That's super helpful. Before we get into it, I would like to, because this is a big discussion, I'd like to get us started with questions. I'd like to flush out questions council might have for staff, so that we have all the information before we start providing comment. I think it's easier for council and staff to proceed that way, and then we'll get into comments. So questions for staff at this point. I'll open it up. Councilor Craddock, and then Councilor Antonelli.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. I guess my question through to Ms. Pedrini is, up until this point in time, the bylaw that's in effect has not been adhered to. So maybe I need a little update on why it has not been adhered to.
That's a really good question. We enforce our bylaw when we get complaints and when people don't adhere to the regulations. But why individuals choose not to adhere to a zoning bylaw, I really wouldn't want to speculate. I'm sure there is obviously some concerns on the part of landowners that have to this point not adhered to the retaining wall maximum because they are having challenges with building what their preferential design would be for houses on a hillside. As per our guidelines, we do recommend that landowners build stepped foundations, or try to build their foundations into the slope of the land, and try to avoid having like a flat backyard in a hillside environment, because that does increase the amount of retention that would be required. But yeah, it'd be difficult for me to answer why this has happened to this point.
And if I might follow up, Mayor Richmond, also in the hillside policy guidelines, it addresses this issue, but it didn't come through as a bylaw, part of the bylaw that weren't looking for flat lots on hillside. But I also see in there where you talk about working with people on building homes that are low profile that fit the hillside development. Has there been any uptake from people that are building along with that rather than seeing a bunch of flat lots on a hillside?
So we've kind of had a variety of approaches that have been taken, especially along Cerulean Drive, if I can use that as an example. So just earlier, actually just last week, we were speaking with architects who are designing a home and who had hoped to gain a variance to the retaining wall heights because the 1.2 meters wasn't quite high enough. They didn't want a large variance. They were seeking, I think, a 0.8 variance. So they wanted to go up to 2 meters. And I just said, you know, what would be really helpful is if you were able to design your retaining walls within, to comply with our zoning bylaw. I said, is there any way that you can avoid having those retaining walls that exceed 1.2 meters? And sure enough, they actually went back to the drawing board and came back to us a couple hours later and said, yeah, we've revised our design and we are able to fit your maximum height. So no variance needed. At the same time, we've also received 2 applications that we're now processing for variances to our retaining wall height for larger retaining walls. So, I mean, it's kind of a bit all over the map. As we saw from correspondence received by a resident in the area, Miss Lee Edwards, she felt quite strongly that there is a way to design a home within a sloped lot that doesn't require a huge amount of retention. So I think it really actually depends on what the different landowners are seeking in terms of a housing design.
Thank you.
Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I just had a question about the number of variance applications we've had. So I know we've had a couple, you know, for those walls that are already built and they're looking for, you know, relaxation or forgiveness on those. But other than those ones, how many applications for variance have we had in the last little while on the hillside development?
I hope my numbers are correct. So we've received 1 for one of the walls that was built without permit. And then we've received 1 other one from an applicant who has not yet built anything on site. So those are the ones in-house in progress right now. We've had 2 go to the Board of Variance for walls that were built without permit that were not refused by the Board of Variance, but basically the board decided that they were not considered minor variances and therefore beyond their scope. Like I said, we've received 1 development variance permit from one of those applicants to date. And then I thought we had a 3rd coming in, but as I mentioned, they were able to redesign and fit within the bylaw.
So maybe if do you have a follow-up, Councillor Antonelli? Good. If I can maybe piggyback on Councillor Antonelli's question, and I know there's no way of knowing this precisely, but you know, first of all, as a preface, you know, we're talking about looking at how lots get subdivided in the future to avoid some of this. We're looking at you know, those that are in stream and how to deal with them right now. So looking to the future for sure. In the meantime, with the in-stream, with the way lots have been subdivided up till now, and again, I recognize this is a tough question. Do you feel that the way a lot of these lots are shaped, that there's going to be a lot of properties that will require or be looking for variances over the 1.2?
Yeah, I apologize. I don't think I'm able to answer that question. It's really going to depend upon each individual property owner. If you're looking for a number of how many lots are located on steep slopes, that would be a number I could bring back to you, but on how many may require retention, depending on their design, I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
You know what, I think just what you said, knowing how many properties are pretty steep would be helpful, a little bit. Now, again, we're trying, as a council here, we're trying to wrap our heads around the future and making sure the hillside gets developed in a way that we feel meets the landscape, and we're also trying to deal with what we've got at hand. So understanding those numbers is helpful. So yeah, that would be helpful in the future.
Okay.
More questions? Councilor Craddock.
Thank you very much, Mayor Richmond. If I could just continue here. First of all, I guess I'll say with your options, I'm certainly not in favor of doing another study and taking a minimum of 6 months to do it. That puts off building for the people that have either started or want to start. It puts them off for a whole year of building pretty well while we make that decision. I also took a look at the bylaws, and we allow earth-filled sites with a 2-to-1 slope. But then when I look at the bylaw, I also see that if people put retaining walls up at 1.2 meters with a 0.6 meter setback and then another 0.12 meter wall, that's equivalent to the same as an earth-filled site at a 2-to-1 slope. People will lose a bit of their backyard, but that's their choice if they want to build a level lot on a hillside. So I guess when I look at your options, excuse me, my feeling is that I would like to stay with the status quo and enforce it entirely. Thanks, Mayor Richmond.
What you're saying is you'd like to keep the 1.2 meter maximum and then have everything else come through a variance process. If anybody, you're saying keep 1.2 maximum, sorry, and then anybody wants more than that to go through the variance process? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm not. I'm suggesting that we stick to the bylaw. The bylaw allows people to go higher than 1.2 meters, but there has to be a setback on each elevation gain that's in the bylaw, and just leave it there. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at variances on potentially up to 60 lots. And quite frankly, I don't want to have to decide between one owner and another owner what's right and what's wrong. I think if we have a bylaw that the community is already in favor of and helped us pass, maybe we should stick to what we've got in place.
So no maximum height then, just the engineering and the landscaping requirements over 1.2 meter, but no maximum height? I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly.
That's correct, because looking at most of the sites out there, I don't think people are going to want to go over about 4 to 5 meters, which means they'll lose about, 8 to 3 meters of their property on the top. Right now the bylaw doesn't set a maximum height. I'm just hoping that people will realize if you're buying a hillside slope, to me, it's not the way I would build, but other people choose to build that way by leveling it off so they've got a bigger yard. So that's their choice, but I don't believe that we should vary from the bylaw that's in place.
Thank you. Sounds like we're in the comments. Unless there's any other questions, I'm open to comments. Councillor Antonelli.
Well, that was my question. We're on to comments now. Okay,
Go ahead.
I'll lead in. Okay, well, just looking at the work plan, it seems to me that what's on there is a lot of work that the developer could possibly be doing. So for example, creating an inventory of challenging lots for further analysis. I think this is work we should invite the developer to do. I don't think taxpayer money should be spent analyzing that property in detail. I also think we should be encouraging the developer to take on some of these responsibilities. So for example, if there are multiple steep lots side by side that need common retaining, I think rather than expecting individual lot owners to form a little coalition and try and work together and share costs, I think we should be looking to the developer to be selling developable lots. So that said, and looking at how many variance applications we've actually had, it's only one or two. I agree with Councillor Craddock. I think we should just leave the bylaw as it is. So right now, a 1.2 meter wall is permitted, then a setback of 60 centimeters, and then you can go up again. I think that is the best tool for arriving at what our hillside development guidelines point to, which is slope sensitive design. So the step foundations, the terraced yards, I think we already have a tool in place that accomplishes that. And for those occasions where an individual lot owner cannot accomplish what they want to, we do have the variance process. And we've hardly seen any of that to date. So I'm not in favor of paying to implement that work plan. I'm in favor of maintaining the status quo, working with the developer to ensure that developable lots are being sold, and working with individual owners if they feel they really can't meet our zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I see you, Councillor Noble, but I just want to maybe clear something up here. I feel like Councillor Antonelli and Councillor Craddock, you're both saying stay with the status quo, but I feel like the status quo, you understand it differently. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. The status quo with the bylaw currently is actually a maximum of 1.2, I believe. It was proposed by staff to remove that, and we didn't take that step. We asked staff to do what staff has done today and bring back some options for us. So Councillor Craddock, I don't know if I misheard you. I feel like Councillor Antonelli, you see that, you get that. It's 1.2 maximum. Anything above 1.2 requires engineering and a variance. Councillor Craddock, I just want to make sure you're on the same page as that you recognize that 1.2 is the maximum right now in the bylaw.
No, that's not correct. If you look at page 30 under number 3, it specifically states maintain the status quo, and it lists out exactly what can be done. And that says 1.2 meters long as it ensures there's a 0.6 meter minimum horizontal run between each layer. So unless I'm reading it incorrectly, this is what's been put in our agenda, and that's what the status quo is.
So staff, can you help clear this up?
So the status quo is a maximum height of retaining wall of 1.2 meters. And how we interpret an individual retaining wall is as long as it's separated by 0.6 meters run, you can go up another 1.2 meters high, and that's not considered the same retaining wall. So our maximum is definitely 1.2 meters as it stands today.
That's correct. But with the going in the 0.6 meters, a person can terrace it up a number of heights. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that's what's in the bylaw presently.
And that's exactly what I said. So I'm fully aware of what's in the bylaw.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear because I thought you were saying that there wasn't a maximum. I just want to make sure you're on the same page. Thank you for clarifying.
I think we are.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Councillor Noble.
I agree with Councillor Antonelli and Councillor Craddock, and I would support the status quo at this time.
Councillor Zant, anything to add?
Nothing to add, except I echo the other 3 councillors' support on this motion.
So I'm hearing quite clearly from council that we would like to keep the 1.2 maximum as described with the 0.6. You can go up another one, that's considered another wall, and everything after that would take us through the variance process. The one thing I would like to flag for us is, and I don't know that there's an answer, it's just a consideration, I guess, is that by doing that, we will be pushing people through the variance process. There will be some properties that people will feel that those requirements don't allow them to develop in a cost-effective way. So we will be seeing some variances. So I guess I want us to consider, and I know you don't know what that is, but what it looks like for us to approve those variances. Is it, what are the criteria going to be for us to say yes to those? And obviously it's a case-by-case thing. That's why the variances, but we're saying 1.2 and then, but we're also encouraging applicants to go through a process. And I want to make sure we're encouraging developers and builders and homeowners to go through a process where they do have the ability to be heard and make their special case before council. And I know we all have that intention, but I just worry that if we're saying 1.2 and that's the end of it, you got to go through a variance. What's it going to take for that variance? So it's not something I really want to, I don't know that we need to flesh out right now, but I think it's a consideration. It's something I always think about when we create process for our residents. I want to make sure that the process actually has the potential for an outcome, as opposed to putting them through a process that will just take them back to the start here. So I'm not sure if that was entirely clear, but I just want that consideration from council when we're looking at variances. Any other discussion? Go ahead, Ms. Pagini. Yes, I'm saying.
I guess I was just going to note that, I mean, obviously the Local Government Act gives landowners the ability to apply for a variance, either through the Board of Variance or through a development variance permit. And council should look at each application on a case-by-case basis and assess the merits of each application.
Sounds like we might, we have the potential for looking at a number of them, but we'll see how that goes.
May I have one more comment? And I
yeah.
agree. They may not actually, it depends on whether the Board of Variance feels this is outside of their purview, but they could easily just go to the Board of Variance as opposed to coming for a development variance permit. So it just should be noted that council may not actually see these.
Right.
Yeah, it's actually the applicant's choice whether they seek the variance through the Board of Variance. If the Board of Variance refuses the application or deems it to be outside of their scope, then obviously their only avenue is to come forward to council.
And I know we're discussing the Board of Variance sort of procedures in the next item, so that might affect it in terms of meeting times. But if somebody did want to go through that variance process, if they had all the information in line, could you estimate how long that process would take them for somebody to go through?
Oh, the Board of Variance process?
Board of Variance, and yeah, being able to.
Yeah, so Board of Variance meetings are held on a monthly basis now. We've created a monthly schedule. And so as long as applications meet, we have a deadline, they'll be processed within the next 30 to 32 days, I believe. It's something like to that effect.
So if somebody comes forward with a design that entails a higher than 1.2 meter retaining wall, to carry on with the development permit process, this will add a month to 2 months, potentially, if all the ducks are in line, to that process. Is that a fair statement?
You're now talking about the development variance process?
I'm talking.
You said development variance process, but I think you meant Board of Variance.
Board of Variance process, yeah.
Yeah, it's about a month to month and a half for the Board of Variance. And then for the development variance process, it's a little longer because we do have the obligation to notify the adjacent property owners within 100 meters. So it just takes a bit longer, and then it has to obviously come to, well, it actually could come around the same timing, given that we have, bi-monthly council meetings. So I would say it's about a 1.5 to 2 month process.
Okay, thank you. So my comments would be, I am very much in line with the rest of council that I want to protect the development, or not protect the development, but ensure that the development on the hillside and other hillsides fits the natural landscape as much as possible, fits the character of the valley. So I very much support that intention. I do have some concerns that we're adding layers to the process for builders and developers, and that could be cumbersome. So I'm hopeful that we can take them through the process in a streamlined manner. But with all that said, I will support the direction of council if somebody would like to make a motion. Councillor Craddock, make the motion. Just maybe be clear about it again.
The motion to accept the status quo is laid out in option number 3.
Here, seconder. Anyone want a second? Oh, Councillor Zant. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to staff for bringing this back on a number of occasions. I think it's been really important to everybody. I think, like I said a few minutes ago, everybody is very keen to make sure development is it's a suitable type of development for our hillside. And we don't want to block and lock down builders, but we want to get it right. There's only one go at this, so we do want to get it right. So thanks to staff for bringing this back. Can I ask what we call a post-motion question then? So we've made that sort of decision in terms of moving forward. That covers a lot of the in-stream. Are we still looking at any other review or considerations for future subdivisions so that things are laid out in a different manner? And can you just remind me what that looks like, Ms. Pagini or Ms. Gilmore?
I think I might let the village's approving officer answer that question.
Okay, no, I'm happy to take that one. So what we've already seen some applications come in for subdivisions on the hillside to further extend in the Sunstone area. And we've been very clear from the beginning that we want to see grading plans. We want to make sure that the elevations of the road aren't going to be too dramatic so that we're going to have to see different amounts of retention for any phase as we go forward. We've reiterated over and over again how important this is, and we do not want to experience what we're struggling with right now. And we will have an extensive review before they're granted any future subdivisions.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I'm happy with the work we did on the hillside guidelines, but I still don't feel that they are firm enough to ensure that. So I'm glad to hear that work's going to happen.
If I could add one more comment.
Yeah,
It's
for sure.
just to the hillside design guidelines came in after those subdivisions were completed. So at least now we have a very workable document to show and outline exactly what the village would like to see.
For sure. Thank you. Councillor Craddock, you had a comment?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. I guess I'm glad to hear the administrator say that we're going to be working with the developers on these properties to see what we can do. Because one of the issues I think on Cerulean Drive, excuse me if I'm correct, they changed the road height by about 1.4, 1.6 meters, which added a fair bit of fill required to the downhill lots. If I'm not correct, I want to make sure I'm correct in saying this. So I guess if there was a question is, who would approve that? And is that the engineering, or is that the planning department, or is that the developer that does it on his own and we just have to pick up the pieces?
I don't believe the road was changed, but they came and filled several of the lots on the lower side of that Gov Cerulean Road, which then did alter some of the driveway access. So there's a multiple permits that are required. And that go to bringing fill in and removing fill, to actually the subdivision, to engineering. So all the engineering works are done prior to the subdivision and the work being done, which is bonded for. So once the subdivision goes ahead and all the works have been done, we will release, based on engineering review, submissions from the developer, review from the village, saying that these are all acceptable. There can, as we've seen happen after the fact through site alteration permits, what have you, they are allowed to do changes to some of the lots. And I believe that's what happened at that point. But at that point, some of the developer owned the lots, some of them had been sold, and so they weren't all prepared at the same time. And that's one of the things we do want to avoid moving forward. The site prep will be done on the lots so that there isn't all of a sudden a whole bunch of fill brought in and someone's in a lower cavity and having all those variations in heights throughout the subdivided lots.
I'm glad to hear that, because obviously on 7 O'Clock Drive, the whole street, except for one property, was filled in after the fact, which to me created nothing but a non-hillside development. And I certainly don't want to see that happen again going forward. So thanks very much.
Okay. Any last comments on that? Awesome. Thank you very much, Ms. Virginie. Okay. We are on to number 10, bylaws. We are looking at the first, second, and third reading of the Board of Variance bylaw number 893. And I believe we're going to welcome Ms. Reese. There she is. Good evening, Ms. Reese.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be providing an overview of the report to introduce the Board of Variance bylaw. So every local government that has a zoning bylaw is required by the Local Government Act to have a Board of Variance, including a bylaw to establish the Board of Variance and to set out the procedures for applications and public notices. The existing bylaw was adopted 10 years ago in 2011, and the new bylaw is proposed to reflect current board procedures, update references to the Local Government Act, and to consider an increase in the application fee. A track changes version of the bylaw was included as Appendix B, and the major changes and reasoning have been outlined in the report. Staff recommends that the Board of Variance bylaw number 983/2021 receive first, second, and third reading. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Are there any questions on the proposed changes to the bylaw? Any thoughts? Not a one. Okay. Can somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion. Please first, second, third reading.
A motion to give first, second, third reading as presented. Councillor Grant, seconder. Councillor Antonelli, discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I wasn't seconding that. I just wanted to ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you walk us through the notification requirements?
Yeah, so the Local Government Act requires that adjacent property owners of the variance application are notified. It's been current practice that the village notifies property owners within 100 meters. And this practice is also standard for other planning applications, such as development variance permits and temporary use permits that also require notification.
Follow up, Councillor Antonelli.
Right, so would there be anything in the newspaper?
No, there's no requirements from the Local Government Act to have a newspaper advertisement.
So there's no way of council or the public knowing about this unless you're an immediate neighbor.
Within 100 meters.
There's also a sign posted on the property.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
no.
My mistake. Only for a development variance permit, there's a sign.
Something to note is they are looking at minor variances. So I believe the intent of the legislation is that these variances would only impact adjacent neighbors, and that's where I'm guessing that requirement comes from.
Right, okay, I guess my question then is, what capacity do we have to ensure the neighborhood knows when a variance is being applied for? So for retaining walls, for example.
Right. So currently the tool that we're using is mailing and hand delivering notices to all neighbors that are within 100 meters of that property.
And that's included in the amended version.
That's included in the amended version, and it's exceeding the requirements of the Local Government Act.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Do we post that on our village website as well, or is it just the handout notices that you described?
It is also posted on the village website.
And on our village notice boards. One at the, in front of Municipal and one at the post office.
I think I'm interested in where Councillor Antonelli is probing, because, you know, you look at something like retaining walls, you know, most of these are, the notification is to those that are affected in your neighborhood. And that makes sense when you look at something like retaining walls. Well, that's a visual thing that's, you know, extends beyond your neighborhood into the greater community. So, you know, making sure in whatever way, form that we can, that everybody's aware of these variance requests, I think is important.
May I just note, though, that in the case of the large variances that were requested previously through the Board of Variance, they did make the decision that those variances were not considered minor, and therefore they didn't rule on them. And the applicant had the ability to come forward to council. So, which entails greater notification. There's a sign posted on the property for a development variance permit. And as well, we, Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong, we do an advertisement in the newspaper that council is to consider a variance.
There's no newspaper for a development variance permit, but there is an information sign.
An information sign and then a notification.
Correct.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor, follow up.
Well, I guess it does point to the fact that it is difficult for people in the neighborhood to know what's going on unless you fit within that buffer, because there's no newspaper and there's no sign. So I guess what we're relying on is that the difference between major and minor. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. So it's the applicant's decision whether to apply to the Board of Variance or to council for a development variance permit. Part of the Local Government Act outlining the jurisdiction of the Board of Variance is that they're only able to rule on minor variances that cause undue hardship. It's completely up to the Board of Variance to determine what is considered minor and what is considered undue hardship.
Follow up.
Yeah, I do think that's a bit sticky. So I think it's worked so far, having the Board of Variance, decide that those retaining walls needed further discussion and neighborhood input. So, maybe we can just rely on that process.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councilor Zan.
Just further to Councilor Antonelli's comments about the advertising for this minor variance. And Ms. Pedrini had mentioned that we have the notices are posted on the municipal notice boards. Is that correct? There's 2.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we could also make a posting at the community center, since that is one of our biggest areas of, I'd say one of our higher traffic areas for the public.
I think I would let our corporate officer respond to that question.
So the village has identified 2 locations where we post our official notices. One is at the village office and one is at the post office. And so anything that we do beyond that would be something that we would do on our own to, if council wanted to make the community center an official notice posting spot, we would have to amend the procedure bylaw to include that as a location. So.
Follow up, Councilor Zant, are you good?
All right, I missed that, Mike. The compressor's going downstairs. Can you say it again?
I said, are you good, or did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good. I believe I still made the motion for first, second, third readings.
I haven't got a seconder yet. We're still working through it. Councilor Antonelli?
Could we put it on the e-news? Because that would solve a lot of this.
Would that require
If I may, we do advertise the Board of Variance meetings on the e-news when there's one, and it is on the village calendar. So it's included on the like any public meeting that the village has is included on in the e-news and on the calendar.
All right. Any further comments or questions? Would somebody like to second the motion as presented? Councilor Craddock, further discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Reese and Ms. Pedrini.
Thank you.
Is everybody good? Do we need 5 quick minutes before we carry on, or how is everybody feeling? Good. Okay. Give you the option before we went to the mayor's report.
Oh,
I changed my mind. Can we take a break?
I gave you the option. Yeah. Okay. number of meeting updates I'd like to give you. I had a minister's teleconference with Minister Osborne, Minister of Municipal Affairs. A lot of the discussion was around the SERP funding, and there's apparently more news coming. Hopefully good news for us. There's still more funding applications out there, so we'll see how that goes. And there was a lot of conversation around parks, similar to some of the other conversations we've had today and will again, about parks and the anticipation of the crowds that are coming. I think you all saw what I sent to you, or I think actually the COO forwarded that one on to you, the reservations bulletin from the province talking about opening reservations for campgrounds and parks. So that'll be helpful. We're hopeful that one of the things that all the mayors have been pushing for on these calls is clearer and sooner communication to municipalities to let us know what their plans are for parks so that we can be prepared. We also had the meeting with, or joining was Minister Malcolmson, she's the Minister of Addictions and Mental Health. And we had a really good conversation with the Lower Mainland mayors and the ministers on that. She led with basically her mandate, as well as the outreach resources that are being provided right now. Spoke about the Emerging Crisis Fund, which is support, provides money for support for housing the homeless and the hard to house, and supportive housing, and a number of other resources. And then we did a bit of a roundtable, and different communities, different sizes, different challenges. Certainly the common thread was all the mayors feeling, all the communities feeling increased stress on mental health and the results of increased stress on mental health. There was conversations again from everything from larger scale supportive housing. When I spoke, I tried to bring the focus to the small town, and I sort of pointed out the fact that the resources and the funding that was mentioned at the outset really didn't help towns like Pemberton or communities like our valley. Those resources didn't make it up this far, and that there is a huge increase in need for services, for mental health services. And basically we're relying on the same services we've always had. And at this point, in talking to different representatives, Ministry of Children and Family Development, their waiting list is completely untenable. The schools lack funding for counselors. Private counselors are booked. I tried to bring forward a lot of the barriers to accessing mental health, including what I just said, including the cost for those that want to access support for mental health. A lot of the insurance and benefit programs actually don't provide full costs or full cost for that. So we just tried to lay out a lot of those barriers and what we're feeling here in a town like Pemberton, and that we needed more support. And we also talked about barriers like just the stigma around mental health and the fact that a lot of people are feeling the stress of the pandemic, feeling pressure on their own mental health, but maybe not recognizing it. And this is something that I really want to highlight. I feel like that a lot of us are suffering any level of depression, anxiety, lack of motivation, you name it. And there's a reluctance to put a name to it. There's a stigma attached to it. And there's a lack of knowledge of what resources are out there. So I think it's important that we keep the message open and alive. And I'm going to address some of it in my upcoming mayor's message, but yeah, I think it's really important. There was a really long conversation about that with that group. Usual Sea to Sky mayors and chairs meetings with the MLA and LNP. The only thing I want to pull out of that was a conversation around the last mile for fiber optics. Last mile for fiber optic, which means we are going to see the installation of fiber from Reed Road all the way to Devine, hopefully by the end of November. And that's what they're calling the final mile in our area. So that's really great news. VCH calls as usual. I think I've forwarded you on all the information I get from them. It's been mostly around vaccination planning. And thankfully, we are seeing that roll out very soon. So that's great news. Attended an SLRD meeting on February 24th. I will try to stick to our region or our area highlights. There was an approval for the funding for the Pemberton Secondary Outdoor Classroom Project. And this is to provide a natural space, workspace for students in the woods. So that was approved. Second reading was given to the affordable housing zoning amendments for areas A, C, and D. I've reported on this before. This is going to trigger a public hearing. What pertains to area C, as I've mentioned in the past, is mostly about allowing for mobile park, like a mobile park zoning, allowance for tiny houses, and gentle densification in area C. So there's going to be a public hearing. I don't have a date for you right now. The public hearing will be for all three areas, A, C, and D, chaired by Director Demare, I believe. Just because it's hard to set up the virtual public hearings right now, so they've decided to put them all into one, and that'll be advertised shortly. There is also a zoning amendment for 9669 Portage Road. This is across from Divine, before you get to Darcy. This is an 11-hectare property. The zoning amendment would look to subdivide that 11 hectares into 8 lots, a minimum of 1 hectare per lot. This is right across from Divine, so it will be a similar development to that. It does fit into what I was just talking about, the gentle densification, and I'll touch on it again in a moment when I talk about housing. But it does sort of fit into that sort of framework of densifying rural areas or allowing for that type of housing to alleviate pressures on housing. And so the proposal by staff was actually to create a new RR2 zoning. This would allow for 1 house and 1 suite on 1 hectare or more. Again, sort of a gentle densification approach. There will be CACs attached to it. It's $15,000 per lot for CACs. So there will be 7 new lots created, meaning $105,000 in amenity contributions. There is a park dedication, so there would be allowance for a park space as well as a play area. Water has been fleshed out. It's all good. And so it's gone to first reading and the referral process at this point. We discussed ticketing and bylaw amendment. There's a bylaw amendment to the ticketing bylaw. This was around animal attractants. The staff came to us saying to the board with the feeling that the ticketing did not allow for flexibility in terms of smaller or larger infractions, mostly around people handling their garbage and their totes, especially in the southern part of the region where there is curbside pickup. The board approved waiving community center fees for our vaccination program at our community center. There was discussion around a regional connectivity project. And so this is a pretty large planning project to basically bring connectivity to most of the remote parts of our very large region. It's a big project. The actual fiber itself is not a responsibility of the local government. That would be up to providers. But this is a planning project to see how and what funds available and who can connect to the more remote parts of the area. We're going to look, there are 2 grant potentials for the board on this, NDIT as well as the SAREP funding. So staff is going to go after those 2. There may be other costs. So there was a discussion around whether this is a regional project and therefore a regional cost, or how does that look? The municipal directors, including myself, spoke up and said, well, we currently have a pretty good sense of what our connectivity abilities are within the village or within our community or municipalities. Therefore, we would be reluctant to help fund that project, but we definitely recognize that municipalities could be the hubs to those connections and therefore should be part of the study. But the staff will be going after some funding opportunities for that. There was a discussion on the housing continuity or housing continuum, sorry. And this was fairly high level discussion. I won't go into full detail, but it was, we've done our housing assessment for the regions and the areas within the region. And, we've noticed there's We know there's a lack of supportive housing region-wide. We know there's a lack of covenanted housing region-wide. There was a recognition that the continuum is a regional approach, and that, you know, every area can't have all levels of the housing continuum provided, and therefore how do we approach this from area D all the way up to area A in Lillooet, to make sure all those different levels of housing along the continuum are provided for. There was discussion around strengthening the CAC policy, as well as establishing a minimum size for types of housing, because there was a lot of discussion about rental and dedicated affordable housing, and the fact that we don't, at the board or at the regional district, have any minimum sizes established for developers for affordable housing. And I don't know if we do, Ms. Gilmore, if that's something that we've provided or if it's something we should look at in the future. But the idea was, you know, the conversation was, developers come forward with an affordable housing project, you know, we should have the guidelines for them. So, because there's been a couple of projects proposed where the livability that was being proposed was not acceptable. So again, at a regional district level, there was discussion about having those minimum sizes provided. I don't know if that's something we would like to look at the village. As well as designating rental only zoning. And this is something I brought up before. You can now, it's a new tool, or relatively new tool for local government to designate rental only zoning within their zoning. And it could be a portion of the lot or a portion of the building. You can do this on existing buildings. And what it means is that in perpetuity, that zoning will always be dedicated to rental. And so you could put that, we could, for instance, put it on our rental apartment building right now. And I wonder if that's something we'll look at or discuss more as we look at housing policies, but there is the ability to zone that and a conversation on that. The funding for the $100,000 to map the Ryan River, that application was supported, as well as a $150,000 grant application for fire smarting in the regional district. This is a new funding stream available to regional districts that they can apply for their own fire smart, up to $50,000 per area. There was also support to look at a funding opportunity for funds for the Sea to Sky Regional Transit, to do a demand analysis, basically to support our drive towards regional transit, so that we can actually have paid staff and not work off the sides of our desk as we try to push this initiative forward. And the last item at that meeting was a temporary use permit for Twin River Gravel. This is between Whistler and Pemberton, as you know, and the temporary use permit was for 3 years for a mobile concrete plant. The idea was that it would actually reduce greenhouse gases, because a lot of the concrete that they produce goes to Whistler. It's not near any residential areas. I inquired about any other environmental concerns, but ultimately the temporary use permit was approved. On the 25th, I attended a committee of the whole budget meeting. I touched on it quickly earlier, looking at a consolidated 5.4% increase, or about $100,000, which results in about a $1.30 increase per $900,000 home. This will increase to about $13 to $14 as planned out at this point for 2022. I also, and other than that, we've talked about that budget. I also attended a hospital district board that was also centered around the budget. Big numbers. I don't want to rush it, but I know it's been a long day. The budget there, to remind you, there's $720,000 from that budget that have been allocated over 2 years, and that's for the fluoroscopy radiology room replacement at the Squamish General Hospital, again over 2 years, as well $500,000 over 2 years to the Whistler Healthcare Foundation to upgrade the trauma rooms at the Whistler Health Center. As well, within the budget, there is funding through VCH projects that were brought forward, things like upgrades to the mental health space in SGH, oxygen supply system work, generator work, water upgrades, sprinkler main work, and all of those, and a number of other projects as presented by VCH. And that leaves approximately $440,000 in reserve balance, although some of that is allocated towards second year spending on the projects I mentioned. Basically, it's a fairly aggressive budget. I've reported on this before. The board is looking to really build healthcare reserves so that we're able to respond to healthcare needs in the area. So they're looking at increases over the next few years to build those reserves, and looking at about $16.50 per $500,000 assessments in order to build those reserves. And that budget was given second and third reading and adopted. And getting close. On February 24th, I attended a meeting of the interim board of the community forest. And this is very exciting because this has been many years in the making, and it's an interim board because the plan is to form a new board, a more permanent board moving forward, but there's a lot of work to do in between. And I will offer Councillor Craddock the opportunity to report on that meeting because he is also a board member on that interim board. And a couple other things, just a reminder along the lines of the tourism discussion that we've been having. I sent you the Destination BC survey. This is working with our local tourism partners, including Tourism Pemberton. Bear in mind, Destination BC is a marketing organization. Their goal is to market our province. We have been reminding them of the other needs that we've talked about in this meeting and other meetings for supporting tourism and supporting our natural assets, but they're primarily a marketing organization. And so with the survey, I really encourage all of you to fill it out because it's our opportunity to inform them and tell them how we want to market our area. We talk about this all the time. Sustainable tourism, low impact, no footprints. How do we manage wildlife and human conflict? How do we make sure we're educating people about campfires and forest fire dangers and how to behave in the backcountry, not to trespass on First Nation lands, all that stuff. I believe that marketing is a big part of that. That education piece will come through the marketing. So I really encourage all of you to fill in this survey. It closes, I didn't write it down. I believe it's March 11th. It takes about 10-15 minutes. And yeah, I just really want to encourage you to do that because it's one of the tools we do have to inform how we welcome tourists and visitors back to our area. A couple items coming up in the next few days. I've got a fire committee meeting, a previous meeting coming up. I've got a meeting with the new Tourism Pemberton president. They had their AGM last week. Mr. Andy Meeker is the new president of Tourism Pemberton. And Mr. Mendonça is the vice president. Reached out to Mr. Meeker and we're going to get together for a conversation and just start that work together. So I look forward to that. And similarly, the chamber is having their AGM on March 17th, where they will be voting in their new members and board. A couple really quick housekeeping items. I want to thank everyone who participated in the Affordable Housing Survey that ended on February 17th. The winner of the survey participation draw was Mr. Frank Ingham. He has donated his 25 gift certificate to the Pemberton Food Bank. So thank you for that. And just a reminder, those that weren't on the meeting today, if there is anybody still with us, that the budget process, there's a public information session on Tuesday, March 16th at 9 o'clock. And the more input we have, the better. Council was looking at a 4%, or committee of whole today was looking at a 4.0% increase in taxation. So we're happy to welcome input on March 16th and on our website. And that is it. So I will turn it over to council reports. Who would like to go first? Councilor Craddock.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. I just got into a coughing fit here, so hopefully you'll abide by me getting through this. Pemberton Valley Diking District meeting on Thursday in February the 21st. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Further this year plans, sediment removal for the Little Red River, North Arm Channel outlet planning, Arn Canal project planning, hydrometric gauge planning. These are all planning portfolios. They're looking at doing Ayers riprap feasibility. Pemberton Creek, they feel, excuse me, They need to take out about 1,000 cubic meters of sediment. They're looking at doing that this year or into the 2022 work budget. And the last planning item they've kind of got in place for this year is a Beaver Piping Works project to see if there's a way they can curtail the little fellas from building their dams along the canals. Excuse me, I don't know what's happened here. Mayor, can you take over on the forestry? I'm having trouble even talking right here. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, right now we have an interim board for the community forest. It's finally been approved. And the idea was to set up some governance structure and membership and to sort of work through those details. Sorry, hang on a second. So yeah, just to discuss the governance of the board and the membership and how it works. There's a lot of details to flesh out on that, and we want to set that board up for success. So that'll be some of the ongoing work. There was discussion around what blocks are, so there's forestry activities planned for this spring, summer. And so there's discussion around those blocks and the communication to the public of where they're going to be and how they're going to get forested. There was very early and high level discussion around numbers and potential income over the years. As we know with forestry, well, many businesses, but with forestry, the prices very much fluctuate. The market fluctuates a lot. So the projections, and so there was talk about how those funds get looked at, what goes back into the community forest. You know, there's been expenses made by Lowot Nation up till now to get this project to this point. Those funds have to get refunded or repaid through revenues from the community forest. So there's a number of discussions along those lines to be had, and we'll be continuing on with that. Again, just to, the idea was to set up the structure and get the whole process going. So exciting to have those conversations, exciting to get that going. More work to be done. But I don't know if I missed anything there, Councillor Craddock. You're on mute.
I think you covered it very well. I think the one thing that I saw come out of the meeting is the relationship building that's going on between the members at that meeting, and how successful it seems to be coming along, and the opportunity for future business partnerships is certainly an exciting opportunity. And it's really looking forward to sometime down the next year or so that we're going to bring in 2 community members to take over our positions, and they'll do the same with Lillooet Nation. So I think it's a really great start to a wonderful partnership, and I think it's bringing the 2 communities a lot closer together. And I think there's also an opportunity here to have some profits that'll benefit our community and their community at the same time. Thanks for taking that up for me.
100%. I think it's win-win-win, and we're looking at, like Councillor Craddock said, the potential for some revenues for the village. And in my mind, more exciting than anything are the opportunities, to be able to steward the forestry in our area and have some level of control over that, as well as the partnership, as Councillor Craddock said, just to build that partnership, which will lead to other partnerships. I think it's wonderful.
And if I might, Mayor Richmond, excuse me, we did discuss the opportunity for local people to buy directly from the Lillooet Nation. So they would pay current timber prices, but the material could be dropped right here in the community rather than having to buy from out of town. So I think that was something that both partners agreed was an opportunity for local entrepreneurs to buy locally.
Absolutely. Just to be clear, it's Lowot Forestry Ventures, not Lowot Nation.
I'm sorry, that's right, it is.
Any other council reports? All right. So none. Correspondence for action. We have one from Ms. Sawchuk from Work BC. The recommendation is that the information be forwarded to the Permanent District Chamber of Commerce and posted on the virtual hub page. So this is about employment service opportunities, grant opportunities. Does anybody have any comment or would like to make the motion?
I'd like to make the motion.
Seconder? Councillor Zant, discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we have 2 items of correspondence for information. Would anybody like to pull any of those out? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive?
Motion to receive.
Councillor Zant, second by Councillor Noble. Discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business. There's a motion. Question period. Ms. Kennedy.
Yes, Dan Falloon has his hand raised.
Mr. Flynn, good evening.
Good evening. Just one very quick clarification regarding the cannabis business license fees. Does the vote tonight end the process? It won't be coming back to council? Just, yeah, confirming that.
Will the process be coming back to council? Is that the question?
Basically, yeah, or just tonight's vote, is that all the readings that are required?
Well, I mean, basically the decision was to, as you saw, to add the application fee and cut the business fee back over 2 years to our regular business fee cost. I think if I can say that the idea about doing it over 2 years was to transition and give council the ability to look next year to make sure there are no extra costs being put on taxpayers because of these businesses, and then it would further be reduced. So I think the idea is to review it next year. Is that the question? Ms. Gilmore, did you have something to add?
We will be bringing forward a bylaw to officially amend the rates moving forward. So it will be coming back to council once that bylaw is prepared for readings.
Okay.
Yes, it does have to go through the bylaw amendment process.
Right. Yeah. Okay, perfect. That's just what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else, Ms. Kennedy? I don't see anybody else on there.
No, Mayor Richmond, there are no other hands raised.
Okay. Well, with that, let's we have to recess the regular and go back in camera. Can I get a motion to that effect? Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Zant. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Let's take 2 minutes and regroup here in 2 minutes at 7:20, and we'll finish up with the in camera. 2 minutes.